Want to watch football without the restrictions of blackouts or cable? Check out expressvpn.com to help you get access to all the live games. Sign up today using the link in the description to get 3 free months.
Go to Bolt fam, it's the director. Chargers fans, it's a good day, man. I'll say this, it's been a while since I've been in one of those Ticketmaster queues where you're holding your breath for like 45 minutes hoping to get a ticket. Well, you know what? With a sigh of relief, I can say tickets secured. I will be in attendance for training camp from the 25th to the 27th. You guys want to say hi? Grab a picture or whatever. I'm going to be wearing my director jersey, roaming around, and obviously soaking in the glory that is the Bolt, which looked absolutely fantastic. And the new interviews and videos we've been seeing on the Chargers YouTube page. Absolutely insane. So excited. You know what? It made me want to throw down a little bit more in terms of predictions for what I think is going to go down at training camp. Of course, firsthand, live action witness. We can give you guys updates as things are going down. But I wanted to give you guys some of the things I think is going to happen at training camp that could have prolonged effects into the actual season, how the roster is built, et cetera, because let's all be honest, man, it's a weird one. I'm not going to say weird. It's a fresh one, right? But this is the most competition that we've seen on the roster going into training camp, maybe in 10, 20 years. It's been a long time, and it's going to really be in these instances and in these practices that a lot of the roster is going to be shaped. So I got some bold predictions I wanted to throw at you guys from training camp this year, which should be pretty exciting. Before we do kick things off, I just wanted to point out Puka Nacua in all of his glory. Such an inspiration, man. Cannot believe how much recognition that man deserves that he is not getting. Before we do kick off, shout out to the sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use code DIRECTOR to match your first deposit up to $250. Newcomers, take a look at this special on screen. It's a great way to support the channel and have some fun along the way. Before we do kick off, hit us up with a like and sub. If you do enjoy this Chargers content, the small amount of time you guys take to hit the like, sub, and bell notification helps me out a lot. Let's get into this bold predictions video. Lights, camera, action. Your Chargers training camp bold predictions before going into that part of the offseason, man. I'm so excited. We'll be about just a little over a week away. Got the travel and everything sorted. We'll be there for a few days. I'm so excited to see this facility, man. I could literally throw up from excitement. All the photos and the video that they've been posting of the facility makes me think it is absolutely the best in the NFL, and that's just the cream of the crop, right? We're going to be able to see Jim Harbaugh and all these dudes in action. Very excited to bring you guys for the first time my firsthand witness of what we are watching unfold at training camp in 2024. Let's go ahead and jump into my first prediction for what's going to go down at training camp in terms of, let's say, roster, let's say guys that stand out. I think things, again, like I mentioned at the top, are going to be shaped with some of the actions and talent we see unfold at training camp. And I think a big part of it this year, maybe even more than we've seen in seasons past, are going to be the rookies. So my first bold prediction, I'll lay it out. It's going to be come out in subcategories too, but my first bold prediction is that 3 Chargers rookies steal top position spots this season. What I mean by that is that you're going to have a wide receiver take the wide receiver 1 position as a rookie. Maybe a lineman take the first lineman position as a rookie. And I think there's a lot of guys in this draft class that stand out because of how, I would say, impressive this draft class was from top to bottom. And the Chargers did not disappoint with a lot of the talent that they brought in pretty much in every single round. Very impressive to see the Chargers' first draft under Joe Ortiz, and it's going to pay off this year, and I think we're going to see a big preview of that in training camp. So we're going to cut that down into 3 subcategories. 3 Chargers rookies still top positions. I'm sure you guys can maybe guess some of the guys I got my eye on. I think the first one's maybe the most obvious. Joe Alt. Now, I'm going to also put in parentheses on this bold prediction. Of course, I do think he's going to take the starting right tackle position, but I also think one of my bold predictions is that he's going to easily grip the transition to right tackle, because if there's one thing that maybe drafting Joe Alt wasn't the safest in terms of picks, is that he would have to switch from the left side to the right side. Be it a small concern for most people, it still was a concern for a top 5 overall pick. That being the case, or that being said, I really don't think I'm worried at all about his transition to right tackle. I think he's going to show us exactly why we drafted him so high and give us a nice preview of what that cornerstone piece could look like in a Jim Harbaugh offense. I know it's Madden. I know that it doesn't count. I know it's all fiction, right? But we've been running the Sim Sundays series every Sunday for the last several weeks, right? And in that series, there's a couple of things that have been pointed out to us as consistencies in those simulations. And one of them, especially in our last week's episode, has been the space generated on the right side of the Chargers offensive line, especially once we got Trey Pipkins started at guard properly. It's been absolutely insane to see the kind of room our running backs have been able to work with, as well as the time in the pocket Justin Herbert's been able to work with as well. It's been very, very evident that Joe Alt was a big reason for that, at least in Sim Sundays. And I do believe that it's going to translate into the Chargers training camp as soon as day one, right? I think a lot of us are going to be out there excited to see the team, but really we're looking to be impressed by what these guys can contribute in the new Jim Harbaugh era. And I feel like Joe Alt is going to stand out as maybe the most obvious addition of the entire offseason as to why he was hand-selected likely by Jim Harbaugh to help build a cornerstone of this offense. Really a very crucial position for Jim Harbaugh teams throughout his career as a coach, and it's going to be very evident why we selected Joe Alt, and I think it's going to put a lot of our worries that we didn't go skill position to rest. So Joe Alt, obvious, he's going to take the starting right tackle 1 spot on the roster, but I also think that transition to right tackle isn't going to be too bad at all. The next rookie, I think, is going to take the number 1 spot on the roster at their position, which maybe this one's a little hotter. Maybe some people aren't on board with this yet. I've been on board with this idea since his name was announced at the pulpit. It's going to be Ladd McConkey, wide receiver 1, which I think could happen a lot sooner than later. Now, if I were to take the safe route here, I would say that Ladd McConkey probably grips the wide receiver 1 spot a couple of weeks, maybe a month or so into the season, which could definitely be the case. I'm going to go ahead and say my bold prediction is that it happens throughout training camp. And again, no disrespect to guys like Josh Palmer and DJ Chark. These veterans obviously have a lot of value to add to the roster, but it feels like the chemistry being built between Ladd McConkey and Justin Herbert, it feels like that duo, that dynamic duo that you see throughout the league, right? Everyone's got that guy that they look at first and last when they're in trouble, and it feels like Ladd McConkey is quickly becoming that for Justin Herbert. I'm very confident in Ladd McConkey's ability to perform. I think his route running, his speed especially, and his overall savviness as a wide receiver is going to pull a lot of favor in from Justin Herbert, as we've already seen throughout minicamp and rookie camp and all that kind of stuff. But throughout training camp especially is where I think that, not favoritism, but, you know, that target, that reliable target and chemistry that you're going to see between him and Justin Herbert become built very, very quickly. And by the first week of the regular season, maybe even, you know, if we get some sample in the preseason, I think Ladd McConkey may be considered the Chargers' number 1 wide receiver, and for very good reason. This is going to be an awesome, awesome duo to see work together. And Justin Herbert, with the kind of speed as well as the kind of route running that Ladd McConkey is going to provide, is going to be something new for fans that I promise you is going to knock our socks off. Just wait, man. I can't wait to be out there in the stands looking at number 15 like, hey, I think this is a play. This is the one. And he goes out there on a streak, on a post, in a corner or whatever, absolutely burns his dude and goes in for a touchdown. I have to imagine that's going to happen at least once while we're there. And finally, of my top 3 rookies that are going to take starting positions, I think truly, maybe even one of the safest predictions of this video, Junior Colson is going to separate himself early. And it's maybe one that comes with a bit of a caveat of, hey man, we have Denzel Perryman. Daiyan Henley looks like he's coming into his own. We've got guys on the roster that maybe fit the linebacker 1 mold a little bit better. But I'm going to say right now, Junior Colson, even as a rookie, a 3rd-round rookie, gives the Chargers the best absolute shot to have premium talent at the position right now in this system. And of course, you guys know, coming from the Michigan, team last year, help leading that defense with Jesse Minter, the entire situation really pulls in favor of Junior Colson being the guy, maybe even one of the centerpieces of this defense. And I think we're going to see some crazy, obvious and clear evidence of his talent and of his situation and circumstance on this team as early as the first week of training camp. I'm so excited to see number 25 out there. Him matched up with Derwin James is something that we've needed for a minute, right? We've had a couple of guys out there the past few seasons that didn't stay with the team, like Kaiser White and Drew Tranquil, who ultimately moved on. But I do believe that the Chargers have something extremely special in Junior Colson. And in parentheses of my bold predictions, I think, if there are any, I don't know how it works in training camp, I'm sure he's going to have some opportunity. I think he aces every, green dot test thrown at him, which basically means that he'll be the guy with the communicator in his helmet. He's going to be relaying instructions to the defense. He'll be kind of the communicative leader of that defense, and it's because of his experience in that system. I think he's going to sync very well with the other linebackers. You'll probably see a lot of him and Dayan Henley on passing downs, a little bit of Denzel Perryman on rundowns. Feels really, really good to think of what our linebacker group looks like today versus what it was just a few months ago when it was all, what are we going to do? We're letting everybody go. What's the situation at linebacker? Junior Colson, I think, is going to separate pretty early. My next bold prediction revolves around the offense this time, and in more particular, the running back position, J.K. Dobbins. Now, there's a bit of a weird fog going over the Chargers running back depth chart for me right now. On one side, it really feels like Gus Edwards, running back one, should maintain that role going into the season, and I think he's going to do a freaking good job at it. I think he's going to bring in a fresh, new dynamic to the run game, a new identity to the run game that the Chargers haven't had in forever, and I think he's going to be a very important piece of the offense. However, I just have this feeling, man, like if J.K. Dobbins can stay healthy, which a lot of us are thinking he can behind Ben Herbert, I feel like we have something extremely special in J.K. Dobbins in this system. So much so that I think he might even steal a majority of RB1 snaps even late in camp. We can say early, sure, but I think Gus Edwards deserves the respect of a majority of those snaps early. But as camp gets going along and as we see how complete of a running back J.K. Dobbins is, how good he is in protection, how good he is, as a receiver, as a speedy guy, a guy that can go all the way to the house, especially as we're seeing that his movement and his agility and his speed don't really feel too off from what he was pre-injury. I feel like we're going to start identifying him as a big strength on the ground. And he may end up being a guy that takes a majority of RB1 snaps by the late part of camp. And if that translates to RB1 status, cool. I would say it's more than likely a RB1A and RB1B situation for the Chargers. But mark my words, if J.K. Dobbins can stay healthy, I think he's going to make a very good impression on the Chargers fans, on the team, on the coaches during training camp. Next up, a guy that we've been seeing flash a little bit in the preseason. I think we're about to see it again, man. Talib Still. I think he's actually going to challenge Ja'Sir Taylor in the slot a little bit. Now, hear me out. Ja'Sir Taylor, at least to me, some people don't agree, and that's all right. Ja'Sir Taylor, to me, is a very capable slot corner. I think in terms of late round values, a guy that, didn't have to be drafted too high, we got a pretty good value in Ja'Sir Taylor, and I think he's going to do an excellent job as the Chargers slot corner this season. However, Talib Still has really been separating himself from the pack these past several weeks, in various offseason programs. And I think that's something that you want on this Chargers team, where the nickel is going to be a very, very important position for this team going forward, whether it be Derwin playing in there, which I'm sure we're going to see a lot of movement between Derwin and some of the other corners, but especially Talib Still and Ja'Sir Taylor. It kind of keeps that idea of freshness alive and well in the Chargers, as well as premium depth. And what I mean by that is you can maybe count on both of those guys to hold down the nickel spot in various situations. And that is something that not a lot of teams can boast, right? The Chargers got a couple of pretty good nickel backs, and I do believe that Talib Still is going to challenge. I don't think he'll completely overthrow Ja'Sir Taylor, but I do think he's going to challenge him for some more snaps in camp, and I do believe that that's something that is going to help benefit this team in the long run. Having more capable corners is certainly not a bad thing on any NFL football team. Next up, a guy that I'm really hoping to see shine a little bit, right? Because speaking of corner, I'm going to throw out a quick shout out to Cam Hart as well, because I think he needs to be in the conversation here. And when it comes to blitzing your DBs, we have to consider him as one of the best guys to get after the quarterback. Okay, I think part of my bold prediction here is that you're going to see a lot of movement from the Chargers DBs in pass rushing, more so than normal. And you're going to see guys like Dean Leonard and Cam Hart challenge a little bit more than we thought for outside work, okay? So Dean Leonard, a guy that's been emerging in terms of special teams, the past couple of seasons, I think that he's going to start emerging as maybe not a bad option on the outside, depending on what happens with Christian Fulton. I would love to see some confidence built in the Fulton signing over the course of the training camp period. But if not, we've seen some flashes in the pan from Dean Leonard. We kind of already know there might be something there. And what Jim Harbaugh and company have been very good at is extracting that from their players and making that the norm for them. So if we can take some of the flashes in the pan that we've seen from Dean Leonard and put him to good use in a more consistent manner on the outside, I could see a pretty nice cornerback 2/outside corner competition or battle going on in training camp this year. So let's keep an eye on Dean Leonard. Will be a bold prediction. I think maybe even stand out in training camp this year. Next up, let's move on to some of the big guys, right? In the middle, we got the defensive line, and this is something that Jim Harbaugh himself has been talking about and hyping up in terms of quality. Like a lot of us, maybe a little bit nervous as to what the situation is, the defensive line. Jim Harbaugh said that himself about the position when he was hired to the job. He's like, man, we got some good guys on certain positions, but defensive line may be a little bit of a question mark there. Well, he later went on to say that ended up being one of the strengths of the team, the defensive line. And I think one guy that's really stood out lately has been Scott Matlock as a leader on the line, but more a producer on the line. And I think, bold prediction, we're going to see him emerge maybe even as defensive tackle 1, or however you want to spell it out, whatever his position is on the defensive line. I think you're going to see him more often than not a starter on this team, and you're going to see him produce some pretty consistent and reliable results. I think Scott Matlock could end up emerging as one of those value guys on the Chargers here really quickly, and I think we're going to see a lot of evidence of that in training camp. Sure, I think the Chargers offensive line and running back room is going to make it really difficult for that position group to shine often, but I do believe by the end of it, we're going to feel very good about what Scott Matlock and the line looks like as a whole. Whereas the position really was something I wasn't very confident in at the top of the offseason. And it still is something that I need to kind of wait and see. Let's prove it a little bit in training camp. But as of right now, everything we're hearing about Scott Matlock feels good. My bold prediction is that he's definitely a starting material on that line. He's going to prove it in training camp. Next up, speaking of the big guys, bold prediction. And it's one that I hope really comes true. The Bozeman and Trey Pipkins experiments pay off big time. And what I mean by that, Bradley Bozeman was a guy that I viewed almost strictly as a bridge player sort of signing, right? Like he's going to come in here, hold down the fort, for a year or two while we go out and look for the next guy at center. I think Bradley Bozeman in this situation, playing with the kind of talent next to him, Zion Johnson or Pipkins and those guys, I think it's going to elevate him. And I think in this system, we're going to start seeing why Jim Harbaugh can maybe be considered an offensive line whisperer, right? A trenches whisperer. And I think Bozeman is going to shine. I really think that he's going to help generate way more room up the middle for guys like Gus Edwards. I think he's going to provide solid blocking for guys like Justin Herbert, but more so than anything, from the center position that I look for, especially in the Justin Herbert era, is communication and leadership from that line. When Corey Linsley was under control of that line, Justin Herbert had some of the best games of his career, and I think Bradley Bozeman, who again, we're hearing good stuff about, could be up to the challenge and could end up being a Chargers maybe longer-term answer at center than a lot of us had pegged him for. And then just to his right, you'll see Trey Pipkins, who I believe is going to pay off so well in that transition. Right, there have been players that when moved to better spots per their talent and per their just evaluation of talent. I think that it's going to be a massively successful experiment for Jim Harbaugh and company. It's something that we've seen. It's something I witnessed in All or Nothing with the Michigan Wolverines 2017. He moved to guard into center and he started snapping. I don't know how that worked out. I think ultimately it did work out pretty well, but it's not something unfamiliar to the Jim Harbaugh way. And I think Trey Pipkins, who's been an on-again, off-again, okay, above-average, below-average tackle, could have new life found at the guard position. And bold prediction, I think it's going to work. I think him playing next to Joe Alt is going to help him. I think him playing next to Bradley Bozeman is going to help him. And I think we've seen the effect of that in the past, right? Where guards who didn't have much business being as good as they are perform. We got guys like Jamari Sawyer, who looks really good, right? I don't know. I just feel very good about this move. I feel very good about these decisions with these two individual linemen. I think it's definitely going to pay off and be obvious payoffs for the Chargers early in training camp. And lastly, speaking of the offensive line, yes, Tuli we're all very excited to see, but to pay attention to some of the depth on this line. This is where I think the Chargers are going to impress a lot of people in the NFL world, right? Chargers fans, myself, a lot of people on the surface are going to be impressed, but I think the guys that are going to be shaking in their boots, the guys that are going to be deeply impressed within the ranks of the NFL are going to be guys that notice the depth that the Chargers have at offensive line. We've got backups like Jamari Sawyer, Jordan McFadden, who's been looking fantastic, maybe an up-and-coming, Alex Leatherwood, a rebound to his career. And of course, I think Carson Barnhart could end up looking really good too. I think the Chargers' depth may end up stealing headlines past, or into training camp very shortly. And that's going to be something that often goes overlooked. Who's paying attention to the swing tackle? Who's paying attention to the backup guard in the NFL? I don't know if I can name very many throughout the league, right? It's not something that gets a lot of attention, but I think the Chargers and the way they built their team, that's going to be something that gets highlighted in terms of what they've constructed over the 2024 season and the inaugural season of Jim Harbaugh and company. I think the depth is going to be very obvious. I think Sawyer and McFadden and Barnhart and all these dudes playing backup roles are going to be elevated from the Harbaugh effect, and I think it's going to be very obvious as to why Chargers fans are embracing the idea of building in the trenches so early. I think having that kind of depth is super important. I think it's going to pay off in very many ways, and evident even with the second and third teams of the Chargers in training camp. Next up. Yes. This is one that I was like, how do I do this? How do I make a bold prediction out of this? Because it feels so obvious. Here we go. I'm going to word it this way. I think the Chargers pass rush exceeds expectations, which is crazy to say because my expectations are all the way up here, dude. The Chargers have maybe the best pass rushing depth in the NFL between Mack, Bosa, Tuli, and Bud. It's absolutely insane to think how deep this team is, how good that rotation's going to look, and the potential of what they can produce is, like I said, sky high. I think it's going to surpass that. Now, how do you have a good camp for Joe Alt and Slater and all these guys, while also having a great camp for Khalil Mack and these dudes? I think with enough reps, you can get certainly a good amount of data on all these guys, but I really do believe that the efficiency and the way the defense is operated with edge rusher and pass rush at the heart of the defense, I think it's going to be so obvious. I think it's going to be so effective, and I really do think that the identity of the defense through training camp is going to be bluntly obvious in terms of that quadruple or that group of four deep edge rushers on the roster. I think that was a really bold move to put Bud Dupree in the mix here, and I think it's going to pay off. And I think, honestly, going into the season with that sort of, reputation, that sort of identity is going to be very scary for other teams in the NFL, man. There are guys out there and teams out there that are very good pass rushers. I think the Eagles are a really good example from last season. They had good depth. They never, relented. They were so consistent. I think the Chargers are kind of that next team this year. So the Chargers pass rush exceeds expectations. Next up, oh man, this is a good one. I think Isaiah Spiller looks reborn in training camp this year. And that's saying something, because Spiller, to me, I don't know if he's ever been that dude, even in training camp, in terms of flash, right? I feel like there was a lot of hype when he was drafted, is certainly by me. And we never really saw it translate. And I don't know if it's because the Chargers weren't in a system that was friendly towards his style. I don't know if that he was, quote unquote, maybe a bust. I think in this system, though, and in this training camp in particular, Isaiah Spiller is going to shine. And because a lot of the strengths in his game, be it the receiving, be it the blocking, be it the size and the patient running, I feel like that does lend itself a little bit better to the Chargers' current offensive system. Be it a lot of help on the offensive line, I'm sure that's going to elevate everybody on the roster, but in particular running back, and I think in particular Isaiah Spiller, who has been more or less disappointing. I think we're going to see some life, and I think we're going to feel pretty good with who I am going to assume is going to be our running back 4 on this roster. And I think he'll have a bit of a role too. I think him and Vidal are are going to see a bit of action in terms of passing, especially J.K. Dobbins, mind you. But I do think that there's a lot that Isaiah Spiller can still contribute, and I'm not quite given up on him yet. I think he has a role, and I think that he's going to look a lot better in this system. Next up, this is a bold one, man. This is bold even for me. Hello, JT Woods. I don't know about you guys, but the great mystery of JT Woods could get a Netflix special at some point, right? Where the heck did he go? Let's get a series about what happened in 2023, dude, because he was gone. He had disappeared. He was on the back of milk cartons all over LA. What happened to JT Woods? My speculation was that he got hit with a case of the vid, right? Or he was sick or injured or something that kept him off the football field the entire year. We just didn't really ever get an answer to what had happened. I think this year there could be some rebirth, or I get at least some rebound from last season, a comeback from last season in terms of especially playmaking too, man. We need playmakers out there, and the Chargers safety position is going to see a lot of movement. I would be shocked if we didn't see a healthy amount of Derwin in the slot. Maybe a bit of nickel Alohi Gilman, right? That lends itself an opportunity for backup safeties to get more involved. And of course, we kind of know the other guy that I'm excited to see out there. But what about, behind, Alohi Gilman or a little bit deeper? I think JT Woods could end up having an opportunity to show us why he was drafted by the Chargers a few seasons ago. Sure, he needs a lot of refinement in coverage, awareness, a lot of the different fundamentals of the position of safety, but a couple of things he really was good at was his speed and ball hawking ability. The guy went up there and got it. He had leaps for days. He could jump like a jackrabbit, go up there and get it. And I do feel like that potential still exists. Coach him up a little bit, and maybe we do see a reemergence in 2024 as a nice backup option for the Chargers at safety. Speaking of safety, this is one that gets me super excited because never in my lifetime did I think Tony Jefferson would end up coming to the Chargers. I think he's going to turn back the clock. I know there's a lot of people out there that were like, oh, okay, whatever, Tony Jefferson. They didn't really mind. They didn't really care. I think this is actually a pretty big move, and it could pay out pretty well. Because considering what he was able to do in his time as a Giant when he was on the field, it wasn't bad. And the fact of the matter is he did have a full year to recover. He wasn't terrible before going down with injury, right? If he can stay on the field, I think we have a pretty decent backup safety on the team, and one that I think you're going to see in a lot of substitute Derwin James roles. And I think we're going to see it pretty evident in training camp. That's another guy that I'm excited to see, as a fan of his prior to his retirement, but also as a Chargers fan that knows we desperately needed depth at safety. And I'm all of a sudden feeling pretty good about that with the signing of Tony Jefferson. All right, so I think he turns back the clock. Another prediction for training camp. I think Brendan Rice steals the show, y'all. I think there's parts of me that want to say Cornelius Johnson could find a lot of favor in terms of making the 53. I think there's a lot inside me that says, don't bury some of the names that we have in front of him, especially Josh Palmer, who I think is going to be a really good option this year. But there's always that guy, right? The Michael Bandys of the world that just go nuclear in training camp and in preseason games. I think Brendan Rice, for me, is the guy I would pick in prediction of that this year. He could be the camp darling. And I feel like that is going to help his chances a lot into making the roster. I think it's already going to be a tough and high hill to climb to make the roster with how many wide receivers are in front of him. But also, it's going to help us understand his potential going into the future. And I understand a lot of us are rooting for Brendan Rice, but let's be honest, he was a late round pick. There is a lot, in terms of obstacles he needs to overcome to even stay on the team. But I feel like a lot of that is going to translate in training camp to, wow, we may have gotten something in terms of talent, in terms of value. Jerry Rice's kid, who's likely putting in time with Jerry Rice himself, maybe the new coach that's involved in his life. I think it's going to pay out at some point. And I think Brendan Rice can end up being that camp darling everybody's excited to see emerge in terms of the sneaky guy, flying under the radar from this rookie class. And I don't know if he's under the radar quite as much as everyone says he is, because everyone's talking about him, right? But Brendan Rice could end up being that nice steal in the later rounds. Finally, speaking of steals, how about them undrafted dudes? Bold predictions. Zach Hines gets featured in this offense quite a bit in training camp, so much so that I do believe he's going to make the roster. That's my prediction. I think he gets involved enough and he shines enough that he makes the roster. And a big reason for that is because I think, of course, showing a nice passing play here to Hines in this photo, it also reflects as to how good he is as a blocker. I think something that he offers the team right now better than maybe any of the other depth tight ends on the roster is his blocking ability. He can go out there and block his butt off and not be asked to handle a single catch and still be a really good member of the roster. I think he's going to make the team. I think we're going to see why he's going to make the team in that way as a blocker, but maybe even a little bit in the receiving end as well. The guy who I failed to grab a photo, I think is going to explode in terms of receivers, though, is Will Dissly. I went back and I watched some of the interview with Matt Money Smith talking about how impressed he is with Will Dissly, the receiver, not just the blocker. We got him because he's a blocker, but the receiver, Will Dissly, is also something that's been very impressive to unfold, to dig into, and I think Will Dissly is going to explode in training camp. We've already seen some explosions from Hayden Hurst, which I do expect to continue, but I think Will Dissly may end up separating himself from the pack as well. Watch out. This could be the next guy for the Chargers at tight end. And finally, maybe my biggest bold prediction in this entire video, and it's one that's going to garner some talk in the comment section. I can almost guarantee it. My bold prediction for the 2024 NFL or Chargers training camp is that Quentin Johnston silences a lot of worries very early in training camp. And some of you guys may say, yeah, he had a great training camp last year too. It didn't translate into the season. You're correct. It did not. But the fact of the matter is, and I've said this before, and I don't mind saying it again, Quentin Johnston was used differently in camp last year than he was in the regular season. Very differently. So much so that it looked like a completely different player when the ball was coming his way in the regular season. And we saw more often than not him drop these passes. Of course, it doesn't excuse the drop passes. He needs to come down with those. But I think his efficiency, the way he's utilized, and an understanding of his game is going to allow him to shine through in training camp, so much so that maybe Chargers fans are willing to let the past be the past and give Quentin Johnston the benefit of the doubt to become a new version of himself in 2024. I think it's very possible. And I'm very excited to think about those aspects of his game that we were hyped on last year that ultimately fell under our feet. The speed, the yak ability, right? The length, like all of it felt very exciting, and then it all kind of got completely obliterated with every drop every week. I think he's going to have a chance to redeem himself, and I think we can start to see it as soon as training camp. So what do you guys think in the comment section below? Those are some of my bold predictions. Maybe not my boldest of bold prediction videos, but things that I certainly am excited to see at camp, things that I think could end up happening at camp. Some of the biggest things, obviously, if I were to choose a couple on this list, I think we're going to see, if I can go back and find a photo, I think we're going to see some craziness from Junior Colson and Ladd McConkey. Of course, we're going to see some craziness from Joe Alto. I just think the first 3 picks for the Chargers this season are going to be among the most impressive we've seen as Chargers fans. And I'm so excited and blessed to be able to get a front row seat to that. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining me. This has been The Director. If you like what you saw here, hit us up with a like and sub on your way out. We'll catch you next time. And as always, bolt up and stay frosty. Man, I'm so excited to see that clash of titans between Joe Alt and maybe Joey Bosa, man. Let's get that on tape, dude.